Okay, first up is Shane. Okay, so pretty straightforward. I think you'll want to do something more with that walk, and you might try a different point of view than the sort of really straight on profile. Maybe you want to do more of like a 3/4 view on a walk if you're going to do a walk. And there is actually a nice moment here where she's looking up, and then I like the looking down before grabbing the, I guess what's a camera. So I think there's some you can use there, but you mentioned in your post something about doing something different. One thing to keep in mind is you can always combine references. So like if you liked something from this reference, you could shoot some of yourself or somebody else and edit it together and use references from multiple sources. Next up is Joanna. And this looks useful. I think you'll find as you start animating, there's actually quite a lot of detail in there to animate. And in fact, so the whole thing is 3 seconds. So your whole animation needs to be, minimum of 5, maximum of 10 seconds. So this could actually be most of it if you were to animate this. There's a few other videos here. I think what's interesting with something like this is really looking at the body movements more than just things like the finger. I think that's going to be key. The body first and then the neck and head is what will make this kind of interesting if you're going to do some of the playing the ocarina. So I would look for more, if you're going to use some of this, you look for the more exaggerated kind of moments of body movement, just so there's something more to look at, because otherwise it could be very static looking. Next up is Vincent. Okay, so it's a little bit long, but I think, where are we here? Yeah, the first 4 seconds is just the title anyways, so, and then, yeah, I like that take and look, and then this is from 8 to 13, let's call that 5 seconds, and then you have this with a pretty long pause there. So let's say maybe 10 seconds of it is, there's not much to animate, but still I guess it's not too far on the long side. If the remaining actual animation is 13 seconds, it's just a little over the sort of 10-second maximum, but I think part of that is because you've got a pretty long pause here starting at 15. Yeah. That's just 3 seconds though. Well, yeah, so you may be able to trim this down a little bit and do something shorter. But yeah, I wouldn't try to do more than 10 seconds. But it's it's good. It's a good reference. I think it'll work well. I think try to kind of trim it down a little bit to get the whole thing to be closer to 10 seconds. But I think the expressions are good. I feel like it's sort of a little bit blurry or low resolution. Maybe you have a high resolution version that you're working with, but it'd be nice to see a slightly sharper version of it. Next is Katarina. So yeah, I mean it's good reference. I think it's always like the most interesting moments are where there's sort of like something unexpected happens or there's some kind of error. So for example, like stuff like that where she goes back and adjusts something she just set down, like that's interesting, and if you add that kind of thing to the animation it'll seem lifelike. Um, Also here where there's a sort of like you know kind of two missed attempts before she gets it right on there. And that sort of pause before lifting her hand away here. Um, that kind of making sure it's steady before lifting your hand. So look for those kinds of details to add to your animation. I think overall, you're not going to want to try to do this whole thing because we're at 34 seconds, so that's going to be much too long. But just take kind of a couple of your favorite moments and narrow that down for the animation. And again, look for those things that are, maybe slightly unexpected, like the corrections or the pauses and the misses. Those kinds of things seem more lifelike. Next up is Lindsay. So there's a lot there. I'm kind of left wondering exactly what you're going to animate, whether it's just this portion or something else. And I think the spinning in the chair. There's not much going on there as far as there's a little bit of foot movement. Besides that, he's pretty still. So, um, in your description, you've got character come to life after artist leaves his desk, walk around the desk, knocks things over, use a ruler, makes a bridge. All of that is too much. So pick a 5 to 10 second portion of that, and have either your son or somebody else act out exactly what it is you want to animate, because what you've described there is not what you have in reference, and what you want to do is shoot video reference of exactly what you intend to animate. So I think you're going to need to kind of narrow that down and make sure you have video reference for what you want to animate. Next up is Natalie. Okay, so it's I mean, you've got a couple walks in there and then some flipping through the book. Right now it's 40 seconds, and you're going to want to narrow it down to 5 or 10 seconds. I also think I think you should try to find more of a kind of a moment of a. it feels very sort of neutral right now. Like there's not much of an emotion or expression or kind of a change of mood somewhere. Like I think what makes this scene interesting is if there's some kind of change, like going from one mood to another, or one, like some kind of change of emotion. I think is very helpful in any scene. So I'll try to just do something, get some more story or life into it. I know it's only a 5 or 10 second thing, but you could still have some sense of something happening. It doesn't look like there's much happening in the scene right now. It has a feel, sort of a neutral feel to it. Um, Also, I think you want to think about camera. I think if you are going to have the character sort of flip through a book, you might want to cut to a close-up of that so we can see what's happening better. Try a different camera angle, and it's helpful to have that on your video references as well. So yeah, I might try shooting something different for this, so it's not just so kind of simple and straightforward, and so you've got a little more to work with. Okay, next up is Yono. Okay, so you've got your character kind of going through a series of stretches. One thing I might try if you're going to do this is you could kind of maybe push things to make things a little more exaggerated, and also kind of like hit some poses and hold them. The character is in sort of constant motion, and also it's sort of, I mean, I guess you might stretch that way. It feels a little somehow it doesn't feel that genuine to me, like how someone would likely do that. And sort of, think about where's he coming from or where's he going to. It's sort of you start in this very neutral pose, pulling the shirt down, which is in fact the most natural feeling part of the whole thing to me, is when he kind of tugs his hoodie down at the beginning there. Um, and I think, rather than being in this sort of constant motion, I think if you can kind of hit a pose and hold it, hit a pose and hold it, only if you can do that in a natural way. Um, and also kind of think of like, what is he coming from, or what is he going to, like sort of thinking about some of that. Or again, like I mentioned with the last one, if there can be some kind of change of emotion, or something like that, like a kind of a mini moment of a story in there. A good thing to think about. So, I mean, it's usable, but I think that you might try to do something different with some of those things in mind. Okay, next up is Sharon. Okay, there's a lot going on here. A lot to choose from. I think I think that walk is particularly interesting, and I mean, it'd be challenging, but it would be something to try. There's a lot of character to that, and that could be pretty fun. Um, I think that I would, really stick to trying to just do something with one character. So I'd probably stay away from any of the reference that requires you to use both. But for example, you could just use, um, you know, this animation, leaving out the second character, because I think that's pretty interesting, and there's a lot going on there. Um, and it's pretty clear. Or then again, maybe some of this stuff is pretty good too. Although the angle is a little challenging to work with, because because it's mostly from behind. And then if you were trying to use his stuff, you'd be obscuring a lot. And I think let's stay away from anything with interaction because that's going to be too difficult. So I would say either like a walk thing or the fight sequence, but just one character going through those motions would be pretty doable. And I think there's a lot of life to these. There's a lot of detail and interesting stuff going on. So, basically I think this walk or maybe this sequence here, with the kick and stuff, those would be pretty interesting things to work with. Okay, next up is Andrea.
You have to. Excellent. You have to.
We've got a pretty good series of poses here. I think I'm wondering how some of that is going to play if the character is sitting on a cloud without a sense of a solid surface underneath her. I mean, maybe it'll be fine, but I'm wondering maybe you want to consider using more of a solid surface. But there's certainly good clear poses. And it definitely matches the original artwork. I guess the only thing is that it's all good stuff to work with. I guess I sort of feel like at least the first half. The whole thing seems like sort of posing for the camera poses, and I get that's sort of the theme of what you're doing. But I would also say it might be interesting to kind of, partway through break from the kind of posing for the camera look and have it switch to sort of a more kind of natural set of movements, because even the last few feel like that looks like a very intentionally kind of posed for a camera kind of set of movements too. And also the whole thing is 23 seconds, so I think you want to trim it down. But I think some of the stuff at the beginning, that first 8 seconds could probably cut down to just a few seconds. And some of these, so yeah, it's a little bit on the long side. And then think about trying to make it feel, I don't know, a little more natural. You could try another shot, unless you want it to really look like the character sort of posing for effect the whole time. That's okay too.